I'm the AI Shepherd narrator for today's message. Sermon notes are linked in the description, perfect for following along and later review. We are entering the third week of our series, Built to Stand, and today we must confront a question that haunts the quiet moments of our lives. Why do we fold under pressure when we were originally designed to stand firm? It is a jarring experience to realize that the steady, unshakable faith we feel during seasons of peace seems to evaporate the moment something pushes back. We often operate under the delusion that we are fine until a trial comes along and breaks us. But we must shift our perspective to understand a fundamental truth. Pressure doesn't create your belief system, it simply reveals it. Let's read James 1:2-8. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Consider the structural integrity of a massive skyscraper. On a calm, sunny day, every building in the skyline looks equally solid. You cannot tell which one has a compromised foundation or where the steel beams are thinning from rust. It is only when the hurricane-force winds arrive that the truth is told. Engineers refer to the moment of collapse as structural failure, and their post-disaster reports almost always conclude that the problem wasn't the intensity of the storm. The problem was the unseen condition of the structure before the storm ever arrived on the horizon. James, the brother of Jesus, understood this perfectly. He wrote his letter to a group of believers who were not merely stressed, but were scattered, exiled from their homes, separated from their families, and facing the literal cost of their lives for following Christ. To these people in the middle of a catastrophic storm, James offers a sentence that feels entirely counterintuitive. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. He doesn't say if you meet them, but when. He invites them to see trials not as a sign of God's absence, but as a necessary part of a construction project that produces a perfect and complete maturity. Before we can even begin to understand how to count it joy, we have to get intensely personal. We cannot look at this as a general observation about people or society. We have to ask, why do I fold under pressure? What is it about my internal architecture that buckles when the bill is overdue, when the relationship fractures, or when the diagnosis is delivered? For most of us, our first instinct isn't joy. It is a cocktail of panic, withdrawal, bargaining, and a very persistent, quiet dread. Today, we are going to look at the three movements James provides to move us from folding to standing. The first reason we fold is that we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what pressure is for. We treat trials as an unwanted interruption to our real lives. We think, if I can just get past this medical crisis or through this financial hole, then I can get back to being a good Christian. But James flips this script entirely. He suggests that the trial is the work. He tells us that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. This Greek word used here is hupomone. This isn't a passive word. It doesn't mean waiting for the storm to pass while you hide in a cellar. It means active endurance, the specific capacity to remain under a massive weight without collapsing. It is the ability to stay in the fire of life without being destroyed by it. To understand hupomone, think again about the bridge. Modern engineers actually design bridges with a specific amount of flex. If you stand on a major bridge during high winds, you might feel it sway.
To the untrained eye, that swaying looks like weakness, like the bridge is about to fail. But the opposite is true. If that bridge were perfectly rigid, it would eventually crack and shatter under the stress. The movement is what keeps it standing. James is teaching us that the trials of life are the flex in our faith. They aren't breaking us, they are revealing whether there is something real and substantive beneath the surface. Pressure is diagnostic. It acts like an X-ray for the soul. When you are under real pressure, when the outcome is out of your control and the cost is high, what actually spills out of you? If anxiety spills out, it might reveal that you've been trusting your own ability to manage your life more than God's sovereignty. If bitterness spills out, it often reveals an idol, something you felt you deserved that you've been protecting. If paralyzing fear spills out, it reveals what you actually believe about whether God is truly good. None of this is fun to witness in ourselves. It is painful to realize that our peace was actually just the absence of trouble. But James says this revealing process is how you become teleos, perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. This word, perfect, doesn't mean you never make a mistake. It refers to being mature, whole, and fully formed. It is the image of a piece of fruit that has finally ripened to its full potential. The pressure in your life right now is not evidence that God has abandoned the plan. In fact, it may be the primary evidence that God is doing exactly what He promised, making you whole. If the first movement is about changing our perspective, the second movement is about changing our practice. Once we realize we are under pressure and we feel ourselves starting to buckle, what do we actually do? James gives a very direct command. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God. We often make wisdom sound like something mystical, like a cloud of smoke or a vague feeling. But in the Hebrew tradition that James grew up in, wisdom was intensely practical. It was defined as skill in living, or the capacity to see clearly when the fog of a trial makes everything blurry. James is saying that when you feel yourself folding, your first move shouldn't be to strategize harder or try to manipulate the circumstances to your advantage. Your first move is to ask. The way James describes God's response to our asking is one of the most beautiful passages in the New Testament. He says, God gives generously to all, without reproach. That phrase, without reproach, is life-changing if you let it sink in. It means that God gives you wisdom while simultaneously making you feel stupid for needing it. He doesn't sigh when you come to Him. He doesn't say, "Didn't we just talk about this last week? Why haven't you figured this out by now?" He gives without adding the weight of shame. For so many of us, the reason we fold is that we are too proud or too ashamed to ask for help. We've been told that needing help is a sign of weakness or spiritual immaturity. James wants to completely demolish that lie. Asking is not a sign of a failing faith. It is the primary exercise of a standing faith. However, James includes a warning about the way we ask. He says we must ask in faith, with no doubting. We have to be careful here because we often misinterpret doubting as having questions. But the Bible is full of people who had massive questions for God. The Psalms are essentially a collection of questions. Doubting, in the context of James, is what he calls double-mindedness. A double-minded person is someone trying to live with one foot in trust and one foot in self-sufficiency. It's the person who prays, "God, please provide for this bill," but is already opening a high-interest credit card because they don't actually believe He will. It's asking God for directions while your hands are already firmly on the steering wheel, committed to a different road. James says this person is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. They are unstable in all their ways because they have no anchor. They are trying to hold on to two worlds at once.
The final movement is about the result of this process. James says, let steadfastness have its full effect. That word effect implies that there is a finished work that only pressure can produce. James is pleading with us, don't cut the process short. Don't try to escape the pressure before it has done what it came to do.
We often mistake standing for performing. We think standing means having a smile on our face, quoting a few verses, and pretending we aren't hurting. But that's not what James is describing. Real standing, the kind that makes you complete, looks like acknowledging the crushing weight of what you were carrying, bringing that weight honestly to God in prayer, and then making the radical choice to trust that He is working even when you can't see a single sign of progress. Standing isn't the absence of wobbling. If you're a human being, you will wobble. Standing is the choice made over and over again to remain rooted in the character of God rather than the volatility of your emotions. I have seen people walk through structural failures of life, divorce, chronic illness, the loss of a child, things that by all rights should have destroyed them. They didn't survive because they were tougher than anyone else or because they had a secret spiritual technique. They stood because in the middle of the darkest season of their lives, they refused to stop asking. They stayed in the conversation with God, and because they stayed in the conversation, something was formed in them that wasn't there before, a wholeness, a maturity, a ripeness of soul. This is the promise of James 1:4, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. This is not a description of a person who lived an easy life. It is a description of a person who was forged in the fire of trials and came out more whole on the other side because they refused to fold. You are built to stand, not because you are strong enough to carry the weight of the world, but because the one who holds you is the one who created the world. As we close, we must move from hearing these words to acting on them. James would later say in this same chapter that we shouldn't just be hearers of the word, but doers. So I want to offer 3 practical ways to respond to this message this week. First, engage in personal reflection. Take a moment to identify the specific trial or pressure you are currently facing. Don't speak in generalities. Is it a financial pressure, a relational strain, an internal battle with anxiety? Once you've named it, ask the harder question. What is this revealing about the underneath of my belief system? What is spilling out of me when I get squeezed? Second, adopt a prayer practice. James 1:5 is a wide-open invitation from the Creator of the universe. I want to challenge you this week to take 5 minutes every single day to ask for wisdom. But here is the key. Don't just ask for the trial to end. Ask for the wisdom to walk through it faithfully. Ask God to show you how to flex without cracking and how to trust Him without a backup plan. Third, focus on community connection. Pressure is always harder to bear in isolation. Look around your life. Is there someone else walking through a season of intense pressure right now? Reach out to them this week. You don't need to bring answers or platitudes, just bring your presence. Remind them that they aren't standing alone. If you are at a point where you feel like you are about to fold and you need someone to stand with you, please don't wait. You can go to viavitachurch.org/prayer and share that request with us. We would be honored to pray for you by name. And if you're looking for a group to walk this out with, check out our online circles at viavitachurch.org/circles. Let's pray together. God, we come to you today acknowledging the weight of the things we've been carrying, some of us for a very long time. We confess that our first instinct is often to panic or to try and fix things in our own strength. But today, we ask for wisdom. We don't just want information, we want clarity. We don't just want answers, we want a deeper trust in you. Thank you that you are a God who gives generously and without reproach. Help us to ask in faith, not with a perfect faith, but with a sincere one. Help us to stand, rooted not in our own shifting emotions, but in your unchanging strength. Do the work in us that only pressure can do, and let it make us whole. Amen. As you leave today, I want to remind you that your generosity is one of the ways we build these practical pathways for others. At Via Vitae, we believe giving is part of a prosperity pathway. It's about God working through open hands to bless the world, not just ourselves. Your support allows us to keep teaching the Word and praying for people who are in the middle of their own storms. As you give today, I invite you to pray, Lord, use this to help someone else grow closer to you. Thank you for being here. Go this week knowing you are built to stand.